Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. What holds women back from stepping fully into their power? Tonight, we're tackling the silent saboteur, shame, and the ways it fuels imposter syndrome and the temptation to blend in rather than boldly stand out. And here's the ultimate question. If you had just 4 hours left to live, how would you spend them? Tonight's show is a call to courage. We're diving deep into overcoming shame, defying self-doubt, and unlocking the freedom to live your best, most unapologetic life. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and empowered because your time is now and your story is worth telling. Today, I'm joined by Marcia Bergen, founder of Marcia Bergen Group at Real Broker. She's also the author of the book, Powerhouse, Strategies for Female Realtors to Outperform the Industry. Marcia, welcome to Empowered. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you. I'm super excited for this opportunity. It's great.
So let's just dive right in. What's the one thing that you would do if you knew no one would ever say this about you?
Well, there's probably a lot of things that I would do if I thought that people might not say terrible things about me. But for me personally, in my own business, but also in my life, I think that I spent a lot of my earlier years, even well into my 40s, really focusing more on what was the perception of me than who did I really want to be, who am I, and who are what are my values. And so getting really clear on that has really changed my life in many, many ways. Obviously, as you said earlier, writing a book is one of the things that really forced me to get clarity on who I am, to tell my story in a very raw, unedited way, something I'd never done before. And in doing so, I really found the courage to step into my business more authentically, to be more brave, even as a mom, but also really allowed me to fully step into my role as a wife and be a better friend, just be a better human, and really align myself with my values.
You know, I was reading your book and I read that, you came from a Mennonite background, very modest background. And, there's certain triggers that you had gone through. And as I was reading your book, I thought, oh my goodness, I have the same triggers of anxiety with somebody driving very, very quickly. So I think your honesty and your transparency in the book will help a lot of women because it actually brought something to the forefront for me. So thank you very much for doing that for me.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. And it's one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But what I realized was that I couldn't tell a part of my story about how did I build my business and how to become successful without really owning my own story, understanding that a lot of the triggers that hold us back are actually triggers that we didn't even put there. And we allow them to define so much of our life in a way that, once I recognize it personally, but I think even, for a lot of my colleagues or friends or the people that I coach, when they realize that the things that are holding them back aren't even the things that they put in their own story, it becomes a little bit comical, but it also becomes a lot more empowering. It allows you to really step into some of the things that have held you back without owning them as, being a deficiency in who you are or, a birth defect. It's just something that, we process all very differently. And from speaking for myself, it really freed me emotionally and really allowed me to step into my life.
And I think just acknowledging that and reading what you've been through, I know a lot of us growing up, don't do that. And what will the people say? And what will the neighbors say? I think that has stopped a lot of women from becoming the person that they were actually meant to be.
Absolutely. I think that even in private, we're not the people that we're meant to be until we can really confront those things because we wear it as shame. We layer so many parts of our personality that we can miss who we actually authentically are.
So, Marcia, when we come back, I want to delve more into your book and more about, you talk about the imposter syndrome. There's so many other things that you talk about that most young women and older women struggle with. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more of Powerhouse and Marcia Bergen. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today, we're tackling overcoming shame to live your best life. Marcia, I want to talk about the one story you tell yourself over and over again that stopped you from being seen.
For myself personally, and it's something that, when I realized it was such a light bulb moment for me, but I had the idea that in order to be successful or to be loved, to be accepted, that I had to be perfect. And the birth of that was something that was so ridiculous, and it's of no fault of anyone's. Like, I think that for myself, through a lot of therapy and, just self-reflection, recognizing that, coming from, a divorced home, growing up in a blended family in a small town. I mean, I'm so grateful that my mom had the power to do those things and to be an example and be a strong woman. But the thing is that it stuck with me for so much of my life. Yep. That I aimed from very early on to be this perfectionist that really it becomes unattainable. It becomes unattainable for an example, like my clients or my friends. Like, no one wants to be perfect and no one is perfect. And so I really allowed a lot of things that were sort of like on the exterior of my life, the perception of me, rule how I wanted people to see me, instead of, owning my story and showing up for people in a way that they could relate to. And also, made them comfortable to share their own stories, which for me, the more that I tell my story, the more that I share my story, the more that I encourage people to, not let these childhood things or like, something that's happened at some point in your life define your whole story. It's been really, really amazing. It's been amazing.
It's interesting because the one thing that keeps popping up on the show over and over and over again is perfectionism. And the thing is, it's a moving target. You will never achieve it. And that's one thing that we always talk about as well, that there's no such thing as being perfect because it just keeps moving. It's unattainable.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And the thing is when you recognize that there's no critic that's worse than the critic that's inside of you, that keeps, giving you that voice that you have to achieve more or you won't be loved. That you have to like switch the goals and always make them higher and higher so that you're not static in one place, instead of stopping and enjoying what is, as opposed to what you think you should be or what you think other people should be saying about you. Because really, like, I feel myself, and I know when I speak with my girlfriends a lot, it's one thing that so many people, and it's not really just female based, but predominantly I think social media and all of the things that are portrayed to us online on a consistent, constant basis make it really difficult for us. I know when I'm coaching or speaking to other agents, it's very easy to get caught up in someone's story, fake story, really, online, as opposed to what really is their life. And it holds other people back. It holds me back. I mean, now I recognize it, and I really have internal conversations with myself to overcome it. And it's the repeated theme all the time when I'm doing coaching workshops, when I'm speaking with other female agents, obviously, because I'm coaching within my industry, but is the perception of somebody else. And, a lot of people, including myself, we don't stop and reflect on, no one's telling the ugly truth in their social media, or very few people are.
Oh, agreed. And we all have those voices too. So I want to ask you about the imposter syndrome. Like, how do you overcome imposter syndrome or resist the urge to copycat, as you said, in social media?
I think for me, like, I was an early adopter within my local industry of social media. And I, decided a long time ago that I wanted to really focus on service. So for me, I feel like I was so focused on who I was and the service that I wanted to provide that organically, part of it, I just didn't have the time. But also, as I became more comfortable in my truth, I realized that people were waiting for me to show up. They want to hear your story. And I think that when you really recognize that and you believe it within yourself, it actually feels almost impossible to want to copy someone else because they're already in that place and I can't be someone else and they can't be me.
So when we come back, I want to talk about a question that I asked in the introduction about, if you had 4 hours to live, what would you do with that time? And I think it's a really special question because a lot of people don't put a lot of thought into it. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more of Powerhouse with Marcia Bergen. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today, we're tackling and overcoming shame to live your best life. Before we went to break, I was asking, if you had 4 hours to live, what would you do with that time, Marcia?
Well, I think that before we talk about what would I do with that time, I think the important question is, why would you ask yourself, what would you do with that 4 hours? And I think that one of the things that gave me a lot of clarity on what were my values. Again, when I ask people, what are your values? They're like, oh, like I love my family. I'm an honest person. But it actually, our values go deeper than that. And they really define who we are and how we stand out in a room or how we hold our values true to us. And so the question, what would you do if you have 4 hours to live, is something that actually I heard from a speaker. His name was Don DePani. He writes books. You should check him out on YouTube. He's really awesome. And the point of it really is to understand your values. So when you ask yourself, if you had 4 hours to live, are you stopping by your favorite clothing store because they have a sale on? No, you're not, because you don't really care that much about the clothes that you wear, that you're going to stop, from seeing your family or spending time with your loved ones or the things that really are what drive you and really are your values. So for me, when I thought about, what if I had only 4 hours to live? First of all, I feel like I would want to send a massive message to every single client who's ever supported me in my business, who's allowed me to be part of their, difficult and stressful stories. I'd want to hug everyone in my family. And I'd also, want to take that time to sort of right any wrongs that I did, like quickly. And so you just get a lot of clarity, I think, quickly when you think 4 hours is not that much time, depending on how many wrongs you've done, but to really right that ship. But what it does is it really provides people with a clarity of what is truly important to them.
It's really interesting because you talk to a lot of busy women. Everyone's super overwhelmed and busy. And they say, I don't have enough time to work out. I don't have enough time to eat properly. Where do you put yourself in your list of to-dos?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think it depends on where I'm at, in business. Definitely it's seasons for me. So there are some seasons where I can definitely be a higher priority to myself. So I would say I am a person who puts my family first. And if you ask my family, they tell you that I also put my business in front of myself. But I have grown to recognize that, I can be the best version of myself when I actually put myself, above the rest, really, because I'm a better partner, a better mother, a better agent. I can just show up better in the world when I do make myself a priority. But I also think on that note, it's also important to recognize that making yourself a priority doesn't look the same for all people.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give you an example. Like, I'm the type of person who I don't find relaxing on the beach for 2 weeks. That's not like how I can take care of myself. I'm a person who, if I know I have a day off, I'll probably go to the grocery store so I can spend the next day cooking in my kitchen. I love to can. And those are the things that really, feed my soul. I love gardening. So I'm a person who is a very busy relaxer. And again, for many years, I wore that as like a terrible thing. Like there was something wrong with me and that I couldn't own that. Where once I actually got clear on who I was and accepted that's actually who I am. Everything got better. Taking care of myself got a lot easier, and I don't apologize for it anymore. But I also don't use it as a crutch to be like, oh, wow, I'm so busy. Those are my relaxing times. Those are the times I'll turn off my phone and take care of myself.
I totally agree with you as well. I'm not one to sit on a beach. I don't like the sun. I don't like sitting out in the sun. That's
Right.
not relaxing for me. I would rather hit the ground running and go to museums and educate myself and see things. And I'm tactile. I want to touch things as well.
Love that.
And I personally believe that you really do need to put yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of everyone else that you love around you.
It's true. And like, I also think that it's important to like recognize that there's nothing wrong with people who want to lay on a beach.
Yeah,
I'm like you. I like to travel, explore, meet new people. And that took a long time. And that's part of overcoming shame, is accepting who you really are in all aspects of your life.
perfect. We will be right back with more. So please don't go away with Marcia Bergen, and Powerhouse. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today we're tackling overcoming shame to live your best life. I'm joined by Marcia Bergen, founder of Marcia Bergen Group at Real Broker and author of the book Powerhouse: Strategies for Female Realtors to Outperform the Industry. Marcia, just before we went to break, and we were talking about putting ourselves first and everything else. Sometimes there are critics, though. How do you identify who the critics are? And I believe that you said that, they aren't always who you think that they are.
This is so true. I think that the first thing that we need to recognize is it's not sometimes that there are critics. There are always going to be critics.
Yeah.
So the critics are always there. They were always there. Whether you were doing good things or bad things, or you were doing nothing at all, there are people who are uncomfortable in their own stories or in a certain place in their life, that are watching, but they're not only watching you, they're watching everybody else because they feel empty or they feel broken, or they're just in turmoil in a transition place in their life that doesn't feel good for them. So I think the first thing to really understand is that the critics are always there. And they're sometimes the people who tell you that your outfit looks amazing, even though you know deep down it looks terrible on you. They're the people who, cheerlead you, but, follow that with a derogatory comment just to keep you a little bit humble and, not feeling super good about yourself. And I think that the more that we work on ourselves and we become comfortable with ourselves and we accept who we are, it becomes, number one, easier to identify the critics. But number two, I think when you recognize that the critics are there, that they were already there, and you save space for them. In fact, sometimes I say to people, give them a front row seat because they're there anyway. And when you leave that space for them, you have more freedom and space for yourself and for your cheerleaders.
So, what makes us want to win over our haters? Because that's a lot of energy.
You know what? It's the funniest thing. And I read a lot of Brene Brown, and she writes about that because God, like, we spend so much time trying to win over the haters that
Yep.
we're not actually telling our story, because we're not authentically ourselves when we're acting out in a way, trying to attract people who aren't going to accept you. They're not going to love you. And it's not even about you. It's about them. So
Yeah.
they can't, because in order to do that, it would really, bruise their ego, or false ego, really. And so I think that, we all naturally want to win over the haters, but the reality is we're not winning them over anyway.
Yeah.
And we recognize that we can save space for the people who truly do show up for us, that show up for us when we do terrible things or we don't act in a way that we're necessarily proud of. But, they dust us off. They love us, not because of our mistakes, but in spite of them. And they cheerlead you and support you. And in that space is where the people are waiting. They're waiting for you to show up. They're waiting for you to tell their story, your story, so that they can find connection with you, that they can find healing with you. And I think, again, as women, it's really hard for us to just do that so easily because we're, flooded with supermodels, with, images of the perfect life, whatever that is,
There's no
on
such
social
thing.
media. Right. And so it gets really, really hard for us not to win over the haters.
So we have less than a minute left. I can't believe that these 4 segments have just flown by. Like, we've been sitting and just, catching up with each other. What are the 3 key components to showing up as yourself? Just quickly.
The 3 key components for yourself is, first of all, to recognize where you came from and to be okay with that, to understand that everyone came from somewhere. The second thing is to save space for yourself because it's really, really hard not to. And the third thing, I think, is to ask yourself constantly, if you never showed up for yourself, really, would you have regret at the end of your life? And I think that if we're all honest with ourselves, the answer would be yes.
I love that, Marcia. Thank you so much for coming on Empowered. Marcia's closing words of wisdom are, don't let someone dim your light. You were meant to shine. Regardless of where you've come from, and you have the ability to step into your life and shine. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.